What I've always appreciated about Strengths Finders, it's really a tool for you or for us as individuals, I found, first and foremost. I think there's so many other tools you've talked about on the show that are really great to help you think about how you work with other people. I think this is one that is really, really good if you're trying to be introspective and think about what you're great at and what uniquely makes you you.
Hello, and welcome to Working Your Way, the podcast dedicated to exploring the journey of authenticity in the workplace and discovering how to navigate it your way. I'm your host, Sandeep Pahuja, and this episode is part of a series called Tools to Work Your Way. Now, in this series, I'm introducing you to my favorite tools, the ones that have really shaped my own personal and professional growth the most and helped me show up more authentically in my own career so that I can work my way. We'll cover some more corporate assessment tools and some tools that are not typically used in the workplace. Now, these tools aren't about defining who you are, but instead about helping you uncover insights about yourself, what you're great at, how you best operate, all so that you can show up more intentionally in work and in life. So for each of these episodes, I'm bringing on a co-host, someone who's just as passionate about the tool that we're exploring as I am. And whether it's a fellow coach that I've trained with or a friend that I've swapped endless voice notes with about this particular system or framework, we'll dive into our own personal insights, and we're going to talk about how you can use these tools to spark your own journey of self-discovery and growth and use them to work your way. So let's get started. Hello, Sandeep. Welcome to Working Your Way. I'm excited to have you on.
It's been a long time coming. I am very, very excited to be here.
I was literally just going to say the same thing. We've been talking about doing something together on a recording for, I don't know, a couple of years maybe. So
yeah, we've only known each other a couple of years, so it's totally.
Yeah, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself and what you do for work. But first, I will say, from a personal standpoint, Sandeep is one of my very, very best friends in the world. We've known each other since, I'm going to say, like 2007, 2008-ish, maybe, through Procter & Gamble, where we both worked, and then lived in Minneapolis at the same time, lived in Chicago at the same time, all of the things. So tell the listeners what you do professionally.
Thank you for having me, Sandeep Pahuja. I have a boutique design and innovation consulting firm called Preferred Futures, where I help my clients and partners navigate the increasing uncertainty that they seem to deal with and face, and help them create innovative products and strategies to bring those products to life. I also teach at UC Berkeley Haas, where I got my MBA, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit. Teach a class there called Designing Futures, which is really about helping this generation of MBAs think about where things are going and then how to make that real. So we try to get them to think 3 to 5 years out, think about the future, and then think about what has to happen today to make their preferred future real.
Awesome. And what are your favorite kinds of problems to solve?
You know, it's going to come up in our conversation today, but I really love problems, period. And I love figuring things out. Like, apparently that's one of my strengths. So the problems that get me really excited these days are the ones that are really, really complicated and multifaceted. I really enjoy systems level problems, actually. And I think that they're the hardest to solve. But when you're talking about big things that are impacting people's lives or the way that technology or society is changing, I love thinking about those kinds of things. And so this moment with, AI changing almost everything has been such an interesting time in my life and career because it is really changing everything every minute. So.
Okay, so we're here today to talk about this tool called CliftonStrengths, formerly known as Strengths Finders, which is what it was called when we both first encountered it. And you and I were on the target team at Procter & Gamble back in, I had to go look it up, it's 2008. So we both took this assessment first back in 2008, which is 18 years ago. my God. Wow, that makes me feel old. And we both have retaken it in the last couple of years. So we're going to talk about what our results were back then, what they are now, what they mean to us, all the things.
Yeah. So this was, I think, when you work in a corporate environment, you do these kinds of trainings and people are like, how do we work more efficiently together? How do we better understand each other? All those kinds of things. I think what I've always appreciated about Strengths Finders, which is, I'm sorry, Clifton, I'm not going to call it Clifton Strengths, but no, but it's really a tool for you or for us as individuals. I found first and foremost. I think there's so many other tools you've talked about on the show that are really great to help you think about how you work with other people. I think this is one that is really, really good if you're trying to be introspective and think about what you're great at and what uniquely makes you you. And yeah, it was such an interesting experience taking it. I remember taking it. We were on the 40th floor, was where our office was in downtown Minneapolis, and you go around and you had your little printout, and you were like, "Well, what are yours? What are yours? What are yours?" And it was very, very fun.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, basically, like, this guy, Don Clifton, is the one that kind of, I don't know, shepherded this approach in the late 90s, I think it was. He's a psychologist, but kind of leaned into positive psychology. And so throughout history of psychology, there's been the pathologizing version of psychology, which is like, here's what's wrong with you, right? And the positive psychology is like, here's what's right with you, and how do we actually focus there? And so he was into that kind of approach, put together this, this framework and statistically significant, assessment that goes along with it. And then this giant organization, Gallup, which is a research firm, really largely focused on the workplace, kind of has adopted this methodology. And so hence the name Clifton Strengths, because Don Clifton created it. But we may refer to it as Strengths Finders as we go throughout. But you take an assessment, and there are 34 what they call strengths themes, and you get your top 5, and you can see all of them, all 34. You can see your top 10. But really what we did when we first did this was focus on, what are your top 5? What order are they in? What do they mean to you? And to your point, I think this tool is really helpful on an individual level. We also did kind of talk about how do we use this to kind of put together project teams where you might bring people with different strengths together and things like that. I don't know that we really actioned that back at the time when we were in corporate together as an organization, but it is something to consider. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on a strengths-based approach, leaning into the stuff that you're already really good at or naturally comes easily to you. Why do you see that as like a good approach in general for yourself or for others?
I think with the benefit of hindsight, right? I think this will also come through in my own strengths. When I first took a competition was one of them, right? So you look at other people and say, this person is excellent at doing this, this, and this. If I was also excellent at that, my career might be different or things might be different for me, right? And I think in hindsight, later leaving Procter and Gamble, going to business school, and my career at IDEO, and now working for myself, it's like, no, the things that make me great are the things that I'm excellent at. They're not the things that I am weak at. It's important to know what your weaknesses are and to be cognizant of what they are and the patterns and the paths that might put you down. But people don't call me for or ask for my help for what I'm weak on. They want my help with what I'm uniquely capable of or uniquely excellent at, right? And so I think that's where this helps you really understand that and really think about it.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. And people don't call you to be like, you used to be bad at this and now you're pretty okay at it. So like, that's what I want to hire you for, right?
No,
so it is
not at
those
all.
things that we become known for. And, I talk a lot about strengths and talents and things where sometimes it can be hard to name and articulate these things for yourself, especially when they're things that come really easily to you. And so that's one of the reasons that I love these types of tools is like, it'll give you a language or it'll give you a comparison to other things that you're not, to say, oh, these things that you just do really well are actually things that are very valuable. And the other thing that I think is really important, and this is like such a big part of kind of my philosophy in my work and how I'm designing my business and what I do, is like when we put more emphasis on the things that we're really good at, we can get more done with less effort. And it's a
Totally.
more kind of sustainable way to succeed versus struggling to try to do things that are not natural to us that leads to burnout.
The things that you're excellent at, you can get into flow very easily doing those things.
Yeah.
They're easy for you. They come easy for you versus the things that you're not great at. They take you way more time, way more effort, way more energy to try to figure them out. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't work on getting better at some things depending on
Yeah.
what you're doing, but maximizing and capitalizing and doubling down on the things you're great at, I think it should be and is totally the right move.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of times the things that we maybe need to fill gaps on might be like hard skills, right? Like I could improve my financial acumen or, my ability to analyze data or, things like that. But these kind of more talent type things can be the ones that we really just lean into and leverage more.
Yep.
So let's get into it. What are your top 5? And I don't know, we could just go through each of our top 5 and say a little bit about what they mean to us.
My top 5 are strategic, arranger, individualization, ideation, and maximizer. And so strategic is really, and correct, I know you and I share some of these.
Yeah.
So jump in for the ones that you share too. But strategic is about like just being able to see through and figure out different ways of how to approach things or really understanding kind of where things are going. Arranger is really interesting because this is a new one for me that I hadn't really thought about for a while. But Arranger is really about like putting the pieces in place, right? So you see a lot of stuff, but how do you put these components together to maximize whatever it is you're trying to achieve, right? Individualization is one of the ones that's more on the relationship side of things, which is really about figuring out how people are at their best and trying to help them and think about how they work together with teams and things like that. Ideation is one that has remained constant for me since the first time I took it, which is, being fascinated by ideas and being able to see connections to things that other people might not see or bridging a gap, things like that. And then maximizer is my last one for this new round, which is about focusing on strengths. Surprise, you called me to talk about CliftonStrengths when I believe in maximizing your strengths. And so trying to make something that's great into something that's superb is how they talk about it. How about you?
Yeah. So my top 5 are strategic. So I think our top 1 was the same, which is interesting. And just, spoiler alert, 3 out of our 5 were the same. So you may get sick of us in this episode. But what I actually had to sit with strategic a bit because I think one thing that's really interesting to me about these types of assessments is like the language that they use. And of course, like from Enneagram to this to whatever, it's like words mean different things to different people. And so it's important like how they define it because a lot of these things are very similar, but there's some nuance and like kind of like the detail of it. And so strategic, what they say is people with the strategic theme create alternative ways to proceed. Faced with any given scenario, they can quickly spot the relevant patterns and issues. And the way that I kind of see this for myself is like being able to almost like evaluate multiple ways to achieve a goal, but like there's also like a lot of inputs that are going into it. And those inputs, depending on who you are, right, might be very different. But I see this as like, I think about the experience of people. Like if I'm designing a workshop, how I might use strategic, it's like you can do it in 20 different ways, but like who's going to be in the room and what do they care about? And are they people
What
who
are you
are
pulling
really
them away
antsy?
from today? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what am I pulling them away from today? Are they people who can sit or are they people who are going to be like really anxious and antsy and want to get up and move and, and then what's the content that we have? How many hours do we have to get right? So it's like putting all these inputs into a machine and being like, I know the best way forward on this. Like that's kind of something that I was thinking about when strategic came up. And even like when I plan group trips, it's like I'm thinking about all the pieces. I'm thinking about the logistics. I'm thinking about the personalities of the people and the space and the time and the things that we're going to be together. And so it's funny because that doesn't on the surface to me scream like the word strategic, right? But the way that they define it through CliftonStrengths is being able to like see all these different scenarios and spot the things that, like what's the best way to kind of get to this goal kind of thing.
Yeah.
So my number 2 is activator, which is making things happen by turning thoughts into action. They want to do things now rather than simply talk about them. And one of the lines in a different, more expanded part of this is like, they tend to be very impatient. And I was like, okay, great. It's not wrong.
That was my number 8, by the way.
Okay, so very similar.
Yep.
Maximizer was my 3rd. It was your 5th. And this is, again, this is focusing on strengths, right? But like for me, I think taking things and people from good to great, like seeing the potential in people and like really being able to kind of hone in on that thing. I want to talk a little bit more about this one because it's one that was still the same for me also. But my 4th one is futuristic. So people in the futuristic theme are inspired by the future and what could be. They energize others with their visions of the future. This one had a lot of like, they don't like to accept the status quo. And so like wanting to move towards something better. And then my 5th one was individualization, which is not surprising to me that this popped up now. It wasn't on mine 17 years ago, but it's people talented in this one are intrigued with the unique qualities of each person. They have a gift for figuring out how different people can work together productively. And that's, again, one that we share. But this one for me was like literally I have like a bit of a longer description here that says individualization, like instinctively, you may have a gift for noticing the differences between people. You might think variety is a good thing, not a bad thing. You might help individuals from diverse backgrounds discover ways that they can cooperate so the team succeeds. And it's about picking out the uniqueness of each person and like figuring out how that all works together. And it's literally what I do with Enneagram with teams. Like figuring out how each person shows up uniquely and how then they all can work together. And like celebrating the differences, right? Versus saying, okay, you always point out the risks in a project and that really annoys me. And so can you stop doing that? It's like, actually, how do we use that thing, right? And how do we leverage those differences? So
totally.
That one was particularly kind of fun for me to think about because I'm like, wow, I literally designed my business around this one concept, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Futuristic was my number 6, which was very interesting to me.
What do you think about strategic? Like how does that show up in your work, in your life? Like thinking about this idea of like multiple ways to proceed, right? And finding patterns and issues like in any given scenario.
I feel like when I'm working with my clients, they have an infinite selection of things that they could go do next, right? And so I think part of the reason why going from P&G to business school at Berkeley to then working at IDEO, which is a design and innovation consulting firm. You had a couple of other IDEO friends on this podcast previously as well. We try to help people navigate through, like, you think your end goal is Y. There are a million ways to get there. What's the best way to get there? And the belief is that putting those pathways in front of real human beings, whether that's an internal stakeholder or a user that uses your product or whatever the case may be, will help guide us to the right path that makes the most sense for your organization at that time. That can be an internal initiative, that can be a product we want to launch, that could be, looking at competition that's out in the world. But I think it's that ability to see through and say, there's so many ways we could go do this. And that for some people is like many of my clients who are not innovation people, but have ended up in innovation roles, they like don't know what they like freeze. That's not the part where they're really good. They're like, this is really hard for me to really think about this, but for somebody like me, that comes pretty naturally to say, okay, cool. Well, I think we could do it 10 different ways. What's exciting to you? What makes sense for your company's capabilities? What makes sense for your team? What makes sense for your risk level, your appetite? Go through all these factors. Great. Here are 3 things that we think we could go do. Let's go show them to your execs. Let's go show them to a bunch of consumers. And cool, we got a pretty clear answer that it could be number 1. Great. Let's go put that out as a prototype out in the real world, and let's let real people decide what the answer is, 1A, B, or C. And that to me is just so natural and so easy to think through and to make happen. And that was that way even before I worked at a place like IDEO, which kind of taught me that process, if you will.
I'm curious about even thinking about the combination of strategic and ideation for you. It's like being able to lay out multiple paths, multiple scenarios, multiple ways of going at a problem. And then the ideation piece is okay, let's think bigger than the constraints that we might put on ourselves to come up with okay, even bigger multiple avenues that we could get there. It kind of, those two fit together in such a way that makes sense in my head about how you do what you do.
The thing that was interesting to me when I took this the first time, it was strategic. And I don't know what order this was in. Strategic was number 1 back then. I know that for sure. And then it was ideation, restorative, competition, and woo, which is short for winning others over. And so what I used to think about myself was that restorative is this very on the ground level, you do this, then this, then this, and you kind of fix problems from the ground up. And strategic was this higher level kind of a thing. And so I had this set of strengths, and they'll tell us there are 33 million combinations that you could have, right? 1 in 33 million is I could see the big picture and help you execute it, right? Which was very true to my experience when we worked together at Target. It was doing something new and different, and then how do you actually execute that and make that happen? Which really brought those 2 things together for me. And now I wasn't really even thinking about ideation, which was the cool, here are 10 ways we could go do that, right? As well as being a part of it. So I think that restorative piece is it makes it a little bit clearer to, at least to me, how I used to be able to, or how I was, naturally I think that way. So.
Yeah. It's restorative is almost more problem focused, I feel like, and strategic is kind of more solutions focused in my head, because it's oh, here are all the paths to get there. Whereas restorative is I can find a problem. I can tell you what's wrong with the thing, right? And also resolve it. But
Totally.
It's an interesting one. I loved, okay, so you had Woo. I remember this from back then. My 2 that fell off of mine, Relator, which is somebody who really values very deep relationships with people. And almost in a way, it was fewer, deeper relationships was how I interpreted it at the time, which I think makes sense for me. It's do I know a lot of people? Yes. But do I have an affinity for much deeper connections with people? Also, absolutely. And the 5th one on mine was self-assurance. And I distinctly remember this because there were 3 people on the team, myself included, who had this one. And the other 2 people that had this one were quite polarizing personalities. And self-assurance is basically you can, intuit what that means. But the way that they define it is people talented at self-assurance feel confident in their ability to take risks and manage their own lives. They have an inner compass that gives them certainty in their decisions, which can be a great thing. And I do think I'm pretty risk averse. I've always been, I don't think I've ever had a confidence problem, right? In my ability to do things since I was 2 years old, and my mom will tell you stories about me, right? But the other 2 people on the team, it's okay, if you're so you're so sure of yourself, if your ideas are not good for other people, that is a really hard thing to deal with as
damaging.
Someone who reports to somebody who is nope, I'm right.
Yeah.
And so
can destroy a culture when you're a leader.
I remember when Woo was one of your top 5 at that time, and everyone was well, of course it is, because what Woo is People talented in the Woo theme love the challenge of meeting new people and winning them over. Winning others over is what Woo is. They derive satisfaction from breaking the ice and making a connection with someone. And you have always been someone from like literally the day that I met you, curly hair, coming into Minnesota, like to visit. Or like like a evaluating if you wanted to move there trip, and it was like the end of April or the end of May or something. We had a snowstorm, like it was
It was May 1st and it snowed.
Exactly. And we all still went out for like a really fun night. But you've always been someone who is very charismatic and just like it literally wins people over with your personality or just your demeanor or whatever it is, right? And or your weird things that you're interested in that you like to talk about. And so
What do you mean? What are you talking about? No.
What was that like for you to have that, and like what do you think about it now?
Thank you for saying that. That's very kind of you to say. Um, I, you know, I think at the time it makes a lot of sense for the time because like right now it's number 16 on my list. And maybe at the end we'll talk about like you can get all 34 ranked or you can just get the top 5 or whatever. But we went ham with our friends at Gallup and got all 34. So
because we also were like, well, what changed and where is it
yeah,
now?
exactly.
And
like, hey, wait, where did my woo go? Where did my woo go?
my last 2 or 3 are very interesting, which we'll talk about here in a second. But yes.
Yeah. No. But yeah, I think that has always been all that stuff has always come naturally to me. Like meeting new people, making new friends has been something that hasn't been very difficult. And like I moved a lot, like as a kid, we didn't move at all. I lived in the same place for 18 years. But then in college, when I was at P&G, we had lived in Cincinnati for a summer, lived in Seattle for a summer, studied abroad. And then we were moving every couple of years when we were at, P&G. And I had graduated from college at NYU and I moved to the Boston area and I knew no one. And so it was like, I think this is like reflective of the time of like having to make friends and figure that out. And I think also from like a professional standpoint, they have these bucketed into 4 groups. So they have executing themes, which are like, this is how you like to get things done. They have the influencing themes, which is how you make change happen, how you speak up, how you make sure others are heard. Relationship building, like what's your mode and what way of doing that, and then strategic thinking, I think are the 4. And so woo is absolutely an influencing thing. And I think what makes a lot of sense to me is at the time I'm an individual contributor. And so to make change happen, you have to be able to go to somebody and say, I have an idea for you. This is going to upend the way you like doing things. This is going to be complicated for you. This is going to create risk for you. But here are all the reasons why you should do it. And so that skill set of being persuasive, I think was a natural reason why CBD and sales was a good fit for me, actually, right? It's like understanding people's real challenges, what they're really trying to go through, and try to win them over to doing something different, right? It's something that we had to do every day. We did every day with our peers or with folks at Target or whatever the case may be. And so Woo felt like it absolutely felt like a bit of a thing that I was doing back at the time. Whereas like I think I'm in a very different place now than I was back then. And from the influencing side, I have maximizer, activator, self-assurance, and competition. Communication and command are now all ahead of Woo, but they're all like in the top half of my things. So it's like themes wise, it's like strategic thinking and influencing are my top 2 themes for sure.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense for what I do for a living and a lot of this stuff. So
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because it gave a visual of like where your top 10 are amongst those 4 themes. And I had 0 of them in executing, which I thought was so weird because I would say like I am kind of a taskmaster. Like I like making things happen and getting things done. But the way, and even that activator one, right, which is like taking thoughts and ideas and putting them into action falls in the influencing bucket. It doesn't fall in the executing bucket.
I think like for me the shift from at P&G mostly individual contribution while I was there, right? go from Target and take on another individual contributor role on the Walgreens business in Chicago, where you and I lived, and you still live in Chicago. And then, I think for me, looking at my own set of strengths, it was like it became pretty clear to me that the things, and again, this is with the benefit of hindsight, is like there wasn't a lot of ideation in our work at P&G. I happened to luck into a role at Target that required us to rethink how we did things, rethink the way that
Yeah.
the Swiffer brand was merchandised, and shows up in the store. But that was not going to be the kind of work that I was excited by. And I remember thinking like, oh, I would love to go to the Innovation Center in Cincinnati, Brick, and work there one day. But it was, you have to work 4 or 5 jobs to get a job there. So like, I already had this natural inclination toward these more innovation type roles, but P&G was not the right fit for me to go have that kind of career, right? And
Yeah.
so I end up in kind of the right place at the right time, coming to business school and then going to IDEO. And then I think where my strengths are now is that they reflect somebody who's had to be a design director for teams, and providing strategic thinking, putting the right pieces in place so we can execute the thing that we need to execute, but not being the person necessarily who's going to do all that in detail, and not necessarily having to be the wooer to win people over towards my ideas anymore, right? So I think it represents a shift in, a lot of the core of that is still there, but it represents a shift in how I operate. And I'm so curious if the Gallup people would recommend you take this every once in a while, probably because it would make them a lot more money, of course, I'm sure. But but once every 15 years, I think it's interesting to think about like the arc of this as well. Is super interesting.
Yeah. And I think about the, like, for you specifically, right? In this kind of, the reflection that you were sharing is like, could you have done that work at P&G? Sure. But you probably would have had to like move over to like global innovation, kind of start at the bottom for a while, live in Cincinnati forever, right? Like some of those other constraints were not things that you would want to do. And like, I was thinking in my head as we were talking about that, I'm like, could you use ideation in the business development function of P&G? And it's like, yeah, I mean, more so like on the shelf design and in-store, creative part of the business, but by nature of what we were doing at that time, which was basically taking all of the P&G resources and assets and brands and products and commercial ideas and fitting them into the box of the retailer, right? Pushing the bounds, but like you're only pushing the bounds
So far.
to a certain extent that like the retailer would allow you to do, right? And you can influence them and you can win them over to take a risk, but like they're still only going to move one step out of their comfort zone, not 10, right?
Totally.
And so then when you have carte blanche, a client brings you in to say, the sky is the limits. You have zero constraints. Help us come up with a new product or help us redesign the way we do XYZ. It's like,
Yeah.
that's when you really can employ that ideation versus like you can incrementally try to use it in another place
Yeah.
where there's more of a container around you.
I will say constraints are the best. Having no, when people tell you they have no constraints, they're lying to you. So that's
yeah, fair.
That is the truth of, at least on this side of things. Like there absolutely are some constraints, but yeah, it's like, I remember on the Walgreens team, I had the Prilosec brand, and every time I went to the brand team, we were the number 2 customer. Every time I went to the brand team and was like, "Can we do this, 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 or this?" No, 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 no. Couldn't do any of it. And it was like my hands were always tied. I felt like our hands were always tied. And I think that was largely due more so to the like commercial agreement that Procter had made to license the Prilosec product and sell it, versus these people being unwilling to try different things. I think they were very interested in trying other things, but it was like you said, double the set of like what we could do. It was a Prilosec what you could do, and then what Walgreens will let you do, and then what my budget and retail budget of
yeah.
X $10 million would let me do, right?
Which, no, I was just going to say, you juxtapose that against like my experience also on the same team, right, with Walgreens. But I was on the CoverGirl brand. And,
Totally.
that's not an over the counter medication, right? There's not as much legal like risk there and health risk and, all these things, right? There's not it was a brand to push the boundaries in, right?
100%.
So I was able to influence back a lot more, and that was one of my more fun jobs that I've had, at P&G, where they trusted me and they trusted my expertise, and they would change things,
Yeah.
on based on our ideas. And so,
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, that's just an aside. It's like such a different thing, right? You were probably in the most boxed in brand, and I was probably in the least at the same time.
And, it's also like category strategy for them, right?
Yeah.
What can they milk and what can Walgreens make more money on and have to invest less in?
Yeah.
My category versus your category kind of thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
So one of the things that I thought was kind of fun, as I was going through my results, is I was thinking about both like the two kind of big buckets of things I do working with teams with the Enneagram, and how like individualization and even futuristic and maximizer play into that work a little bit. And then I was thinking about this podcast and why I started it and what the premise of the show is and the reason it exists for me. And it was like futuristic, like imagining a better reality, not accepting the status quo. Like people don't have to be miserable at work. They can actually do work that they love and do it in a way that allows them to be successful in a sustainable way and not burn out. And that futuristic piece. And then the maximizer part is like seeing the potential in people, or even like pointing out what people do well, even some of my guest interviews, or, like being able to reflect things back to people and talk to them about their own story. And then this kind of activator thing is like, how does someone listening maybe take some of what we talked about and action it for themselves? Like, right, how do you take these ideas or these concepts of this other person's story and apply them to yours? And so I was like,
totally.
I made a little equation. I'm like, yeah, like working your way is basically like futuristic plus maximizer plus activator, I'm
I
like,
love it.
and so that was, yeah, it was like, yes, this makes a lot of sense. And obviously, like, it makes sense that this is how I'm doing it, because I have been very intentional as I built my business to make it feel very aligned to me and who I am and what I care about and how I like to work and all those things, But I was like, oh yeah, you can literally thread together some of these things, and they show up in the work that I'm doing.
I hadn't thought about it like that, but it feels like some combination of my 5: strategic, arranger, maybe less so arranger, but individualization, ideation, maximizer. It's like what I do in class with my students,
Mm.
take their curiosity about how is AI going to change the way we educate our youth, and help them really think about and give them the tools and the frameworks and all that stuff to say, this is what we think the world is going to look like in 5 or 7 years in the most uncertain time of our lifetimes. And then how do we walk that back to say, okay, cool, these are the choices that we need to make to get there. And that is like a through line of this whole set of strengths for me, at least. So that's a nice way to put it. I hadn't thought about it that way.
I was thinking about arranger for you, actually. People in the arranger theme can organize, but they also have a flexibility that complements this ability. They like to determine how all of the pieces and resources can be arranged for maximum productivity. Like, to me, that screams systems thinking, doesn't it? What do you think about that? Like, I'm going to see all the pieces and how they all work together and put them together in a better way.
And where is my leverage point? Where's my key point of influence that will have outsized impact if I can turn this lever on or off? What are the things that are going to have a bigger impact than other things? Absolutely. It feels that way in systems thinking and systems level problems, in some of the more kind of breakthrough innovations work that I work on, which is like outside of the core capabilities of a business or their core consumers. And so helping them really think through, like, okay, if we're going to go do this, this is the thing we really should invest in, or this is the prototype or MVP or test we should run which will give us outsized information and reduce risk the most, right? This is the thing that we should go do. So I feel like that shows up a lot. And then I think there's also like the very practical version of Arranger, which is like, I when I was at IEO, a coworker and a very good friend of mine, Sarah Kadrar, and I did this podcast called Food by Design. It was a narrative style 8-part podcast around the food system and climate change. That was like a huge puzzle. Like, how are we going to figure this out? How are we going to use our budget accordingly, which we had to work very hard to get? How are we going to lay these pieces out accordingly for maximum impact? Like, how do we look at this crazy wall of, 1,000 post-it notes, and then from there say, okay, cool, we've got 16 or 20 hours of tape. How do we turn that into 8 30-minute episodes? And how do we do that with the very limited funding that we had to make that happen, right? And so that also feels like a way to like take all the pieces and put it back together in a way that makes the most sense. Like, we only have so much budget to hire Evan Roberts or or Tina or or Julia or these other people that we hired that helped us with the project. And how do we use those dollars most effectively? It's like a very real, tangible, less, working with the company inside to help them allocate resources kind of thing. So.
Yeah, well, and to that point, Arranger sits in the purple category, in the executing category. So it's very like action oriented, right? And that's exactly what you just described. So that makes a ton of sense. Something that I thought was interesting, 2 things. I guess I was looking at my like bottom 5, which isn't like really the point of this exercise, but I did it anyway. And one of them was adaptability, which is a word I actually really relate to. However, the way that they have described it is like people with adaptability prefer to go with the flow. They tend to be now people who take things as they come and discover the future one day at a time. And interestingly, I'm like, okay, well, first of all, if I have an opinion on something, I've never been someone to go with the flow. Like I'll let you know, like how I feel about it. Now, if I really don't care, I'm fine, but it almost to me felt a little bit like the opposite of futuristic. And so that wasn't necessarily surprising. And like futuristic is like somebody who is not okay with the status quo and wants to create a new future instead of taking things day by day and like letting the future happen, kind of.
So it's also bottom 5 for me, funny enough. And I think I'm a very flexible, adaptable person, but in the way that they described it is not, is just like you. No, thank you. Is not how I like to approach. And then, it's funny because I think consistency is my least on here. And I think like, I would be curious if you have the definitions in front of you. I don't have it in front of me.
I do. It's in it's 31 out of 34 for me, but it says consistency. These people are keenly aware of the need to treat people the same. They crave stable routines and clear rules and procedures that everyone can follow, which to me feels like the opposite of ideation. It feels like the opposite of, like kind of some of these other ones.
My mind went to equality versus equity when you said that, because that sounds to me like equality versus equity. And I remember a moment in my career at IDEO, I was talking to a very senior leader who was like, you'll be so happy we're treating everyone equally in this promotion process. I think I was, being myself and fighting for what I believed would be appropriate for me and people on my team. And the person was like, we're not going to entertain, skip level promotions or other things like that. Of course, I leave a year later and they do for a bunch of people, but it was like, no, you actually should be really thinking about equity right now and actually thinking about what people are producing and give them the appropriate opportunity based on the level they've been producing for you for, not just say you've been producing for us, so now I'm going to take you to this level and really you're up here. And so yeah, no, that is like antithetical to how I might see things, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, and even like preferring stable routines and clear rules and procedures, it's like, that's just kind of like counter to what you do and what you believe in. It's like everything being the same and predictable all the time. It's like, that's actually not at all what you do for your work or, in your life. So
one thing that I found to be very interesting about this was like thinking about my own management philosophy. And I mean that literally like as a manager of teams and people, right?
Yep.
And so when Maximizer showed up in my top five now in individualization, because I think that they are, at least the way I read them, they're like tangentially related, right? Like you, as an individualization, you look at what makes a person unique and makes them who they are, and trying to figure out, great, well, how do I put them in the right context for them to be successful, right? And then
Yeah.
Maximizer to me was like, how do you get the most out of them, or how do you help them achieve the most, or deliver the most, or whatever the most,
Reach their potential.
yeah,
Yeah.
whatever that is for them, right?
Yeah.
And I remember this experience I had also, with a very senior person at IDEO. And at IDEO, the way it worked was you had a business lead who may not be on your projects with you, right? So it's staffing wise, it's like most consulting firms. You have a pool of people that you staff from, and very unlikely, or more rare than more often, is your business lead on a project with you, right? So you're very rarely like seeing the day to day, how is so and so operating, how are they working, etc. And so a lot of your influence has to happen through the leaders of the project, if you're in a director or partnership type role, or through your own people and through their people, right? And so I remember I had this conversation with somebody who was like, yeah, my mentor told me that their approach to management was like, if a person is difficult, I just don't spend any time on them. I only spend time on two of my seven reports, and I just really focus on those two people and not the other five. And to me, that was like, this is like unbelievably bad advice. But
Hmm.
this is how I see the world through the lens of my strengths, which was like, if I can help my people be super successful and raise their potential, like you said, or help them, put them in the right spot, is also half the battle. Is like, when I'm staffing these people, I know who they are, how you're going to build a really, really good team, put them on a great project, and they're going to naturally over deliver. And then even when I was a project leader, when I'm managing my own projects, like, try to carve out space for people to be able to like mess around with or try that thing that they're really interested in, and not be super directive about how they spend their time. Yes, there are things we have to achieve and accomplish, but if you can do that in a way that's super exciting and fun for you, like, you will perform better. This is my belief, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's probably like what worked for me. But yeah, it was just like, I can't believe that this is your philosophy, and that philosophy from that person is going to translate to you, and it's now going to translate to a bunch of other people, and then these people are going to be, left out and feel like nobody cares about them or their career or what they want or what they're good at, versus like trying to find out what makes them uniquely interesting and help them raise the bar. Felt like my role as a leader, and how I thought about it. So that was another kind of
Yeah.
um, realization I had after getting my five back, the 2 days ago or whenever it was, when we took it again.
Yeah, but I think that's the difference between, because that person could have had Maximizer on their list. And they're just
Yeah,
taking what they perceive as already good and making it better, and like
totally.
not even dealing with the like bad to neutral, right? But the
Yep,
combination of the two is, oh, I can see the potential in everybody because I can see them as individuals, right? I can see
totally.
like what each of them bring to the table. And like one without the other is going to give you a different outcome. I definitely I really liked the Maximizer one too. And that was one that was still the same, whatever, almost effing 20 years ago. Like, I saw that in my management style back then as well, just thinking about seeing the potential in the people that I managed, and then really thinking about like what is getting in the way of them using that thing. And like, I remember one of my direct reports was like an incredible executor, just like got stuff done, like had a great capacity to do whatever, but like was getting bogged down in all these things that frankly a multifunctional resource should have been helping. And I like fought tooth and nail to get her support from other functions to help manage inventory and do all these other things that really she shouldn't have been doing. And she then was like, she just took off, right? Like the business took off because she was able to just like do what she did best. Very organized and great at building relationships and like, getting all the people aligned to the things. And it's like, once we were able to clear out those other things, right? She was able to to kind of use that skill and reach that potential. And so I think I noticed that looking back in my career too, of kind of like from a maximizer standpoint, figuring out what is it that this person is great at, and like sometimes honestly like hyping them up. Like that's all they needed from
Yeah.
me, just to see that thing that they were great at. Sometimes it was getting rid of these roadblocks and stuff like that, but like I think I've kind of always been a cheerleader for like the people that worked for me or whatever, even maybe the people in my life to some extent,
Yep.
to kind of help people see that. And I see that now even with like coaching clients and leaders that I work with, just reflecting back to people what I see that's really great about them, articulating it in a way that maybe they haven't before, or like pointing out things that they maybe don't take credit for themselves. And it's something that I really love about myself. So
I love that about you too.
thanks. Okay, so I'm going to kind of wrap us up, but I want to talk about like one more thing. And I'm curious if you have some thoughts on this. I think there is, when you talk about using strengths or working your way, right, working authentically, there's the what, like what are you working on? And then there's the kind of like the how, right, the process of it. And I kind of see these strengths, even our top 5 or our top 10, some of it is in the what we're doing and some of it is in the how we work. And I'm curious, like, did anything come up for you in terms of like how you like to work, like your work processes or the best ways you like to collaborate, or, you know, those types of things that felt interesting or even feels interesting right now?
It's been very interesting for me the last like 3-ish, 4 years of my career since I've gone solo, right? Because I bounce back and forth from I have my own client, I'm staffing up a team, I'm taking more of a leadership type role, or I'm working with friends who have their own projects and they need either individual contributor type person or a project lead type person. So like my modes of working shift dramatically from one thing to the next, from one project to another. And so I think that that is representative of like all of those require strategic and ideation, right? Regardless of what they're doing. But I think it's where the arranger and maximizer bits come to play is like, how are we making sure that some of these things are set up the right way? And you know, I felt in some cases where, you know, I'm not, if it's not my project, I'm not setting up the team necessarily, right? And it's not, it gets harder to then maximize or get the best out of a group that may not be may not have enough time to do the kind of norming, storming, performing, or whatever order it goes in. Is that the order it goes in?
Forming, norming, storming, performing. I think it's
Yeah, what right? Like we don't get past forming, right? Or whatever the case
yeah.
may be. And so
Yeah.
so that I think has been very interesting because it really requires me to do different things. And then some of these times where I might be a solo person helping a team or supporting a couple people or being an advisor, that's a very different also kind of mode of working. And so I think I'm still working it out, to be honest. You know,
Yeah.
you know how it goes with these solo careers, as you talked about recently in a podcast of yours. Like this stuff it can really ebb and flow and change very quickly.
Yeah,
How
and
about
I think
you?
it's something to think about too. It's like if you design your ideal client engagement, you know, what would it look like and how would you use this? And actually, this isn't why I brought the question up, but one of the things that I heard, I just was listening to like I don't know, there's a podcast, Gallup has a podcast or CliftonStrengths has a podcast that's they have like each of the 34 skills, like how do you use this to improve your well-being, or how do you use this in leadership, right? So they go through each one of them and they're like little 15-minute episodes. But the one that I listened to just this morning was I got my 5 strengths, now what? And one of the things that they suggested was to do like a check-in and check-out of your day. So looking at like what do you have on your to-do list for the day, and then thinking about your 5 strength themes and saying, how am I going to use that in all of these? How am I going to use each of these 5 or some of these 5 and each of these things I have to do today? And then when you do your checkout at the end of the day, you could be like, how did I leverage my strengths today? And just having that kind of like top of mind, I think is cool. It's like that felt like a really good kind of practical way to put these into
To use
action
this?
and to keep them top of mind. Yeah. But in terms of like the way that I work, I think having, I think the strategic part for me is an interesting one because and I've learned this about myself and I learn it more and more, is that I need what I'm going to consider a lot of context to do my best thinking. So when I'm like working with the team, I am asking a ton of questions. I'm meeting all the people. I'm having conversations with them, right? And then I can give you all here all the avenues to get to what we're trying to do. But
Yeah.
I need to gather a lot of information, or what I perceive as a lot of information, to do that work to the best of my ability. And it's one of those things that like I in the past have been like, it's almost been seen as like a negative thing that I have a lot of questions, because it's like, oh my God, that's like it's an inconvenience, right? To like sit down and give me all the context that I need. But I'm like, I guarantee you I'm going to do better work if I have that information. And so knowing that about myself and just knowing that like I do need some upfront investment from the client to like sit down and really for me to understand things through my lens in order for me to do my best work, I think is
Yeah.
something that I think is important. And then learners in my top 10, which like I've kind of like recognized that about myself, is that like doing work where I always feel like I can learn more, I could do research, I can become an expert on new things all the time. That is something that I think about like as I design my, 5 years,
Love
10
it.
years out, like that. I think that's always going to be an element to what I do.
How do you think about this for teams? Because I would say like, the other magic time in my career was like 2017 to 2019 at IDEO, but largely with the food team, some stuff abroad as well in the UAE pre-COVID, before I had a kid, a lot of these things. But like, I don't know that this was super beneficial for team purposes. We used other tools that were really helpful for teams, like Five
Yeah.
Dynamics. I don't know if you ever talked about Five Dynamics, but like
Yes.
knowing where you are, if you are an executor or a brainstormer, and like where does the team have gaps, so like, okay, we're not really great at the analysis part of this, so we need to spend this group of 4 people needs to spend more time thinking on that. So I don't know. How do you think about CliftonStrengths with teams? Do you think about it with teams, or are you on my page that it's like best for you as an individual to do some of that kind of self-reflecting and think about yourself?
I'd say it's the 2.0, right? I think it
Yeah.
can be very valuable as a team. What I think becomes a challenge is it's a lot to hold to really actually understand 34 unique strengths. Like,
Yeah. Way too much.
if you look at it maybe from those 4 buckets, right, of like executing and strategic thinking and influencing, and like where your people are kind of more heavily weighted, and maybe if they have like a good, weighting in one or those, and maybe you're putting something together that way, that feels a little more accessible to me. But to say, oh, I know all 34 strengths and I'm going to exactly on this project pull this together and this together and this together, it's hard. That's a lot of work. I think if you did it though, it could be really valuable. Or
Yeah.
maybe you put people together that like someone who's great at seeing risks and someone who's great at ideation, and like pair them together. And they're probably going to drive each other a little crazy in their process, but they're going to come up with something better. And so,
Yeah. The outcome will probably be better.
yeah, I think if you take it high level in that sense and like think about what's needed on this project to make it successful, I don't know that it's super realistic in, like I have a team of brand managers and brand directors that I'm working with. And can they each like get assigned different work all the time based on the mix of the team? No, like they have a brand, their team needs to work on that brand, right? But if they're like, quote unquote extracurriculars, hey, we're going to create a new process for working with an agency. Let's pull a couple of people whose strengths might complement each other. Those types of things I think are where you could use something like this realistically in a business.
So, okay, 2 ideas for Gallup if they're listening, when they listen, because somebody's gonna send this to somebody at Gallup.
Totally.
Like, take my 5 reports for my team and give me a team analysis, right? And then
Yeah.
number 2, they should have you on the Gallup podcast. Gallup, you need to do a one-on-one coaching session with Sonia about her about our strengths and have them analyze you the way you do Enneagram with your peeps and your teams. I think that'd be really fun.
Well, actually, I'm so glad you said that because this is a good segue. I have something to read for us. I had not Gallup, but ChatGPT
Who's
analyze our
that?
top 5 strengths. And I said, okay, take these 5 strengths and summarize them, and then tell me what is something that I might not have thought about. And so for yours, it is with strategic, arranger, individualization, ideation, and maximizer, you're a highly adaptive and creative thinker who thrives on making complex things work better. You naturally see patterns, possibilities, and connections. Whether between people, ideas, or systems, you love customizing solutions to bring out the best in every situation. You're energized by organizing moving parts, elevating the quality of outcomes, and tailoring your approach to the uniqueness of each person or challenge. Efficiency, excellence, and originality are core to how you operate. Something you might not have identified, because you're so skilled at orchestrating complexity and improving things quickly, others may come to rely on you as the one who makes it all work. But your mind is probably firing off new ideas and improvements constantly, not because things are broken, but because your brain is wired to optimize and innovate. If you don't give yourself permission to step back from constant improvement mode, you might unintentionally burn out or feel like your contributions aren't enough, even when others see you as indispensable. Sometimes good enough is good enough.
Love it. It's great advice. Knowing when to stop is really
Yeah.
important and something I've had to work on for a long time. You know,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
keep, and I would say I've actually learned that lesson more from the many different capital D designers I've worked with over the years who are like, they could iterate forever and ever and ever and ever. And it's like, yo, this is great. We're at a 99. And to go from a 99 to a 99.5 is going to take you as much time as it took you to go from 99 to here. So we're done.
Yeah.
You're not going to get to 100 and we're done. And so we're done because the project is over and people don't have unlimited budgets and we need to get things out in the world,
Because we've used up our scope of hours on the ideation part.
seriously, seriously. But yeah, I've actually really learned that from watching other people and being like, is this, and I think my problem is my quality bar is pretty high. And so sometimes I have to be like, okay, my quality bar is really high. If I put something out that was 80% of my quality bar, what would happen? And what you realize is like 97.5% of people do not notice the difference, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
And it depends on the type of thing, of course. Like when to be a perfectionist about something and when not to be, but yeah.
Well, and I think that's why, like, that last line of the overview of yours, efficiency, excellence, and originality are core to how you operate. Like those 3 things, excellence isn't always efficient. Efficient is definitely not original. Like originality is not usually excellent. Like, right? So, but the intersection of those 3 things is I think really kind of interesting and something I was like,
Yeah.
that feels actually really right for you. So,
Are you going to read yours or should I read yours?
you can read it.
With strategic, activator, maximizer, futuristic, and individualization, you're someone who moves fast with purpose. You see possibilities before others do, get excited to act on them quickly, and are naturally wired to make things better, not just good, but exceptional. You're future focused, energized by momentum, and thrive when you can tailor experiences to individuals rather than take a one size fits all approach. You likely lead with vision, energy, and a deep appreciation for potential, both in people and in ideas. Something you may not have identified. You may sometimes skip over celebration or pause too briefly, not out of ingratitude, but because your brain is already on to the next possibility, next improvement, or next person to uplift. This combo of strengths means that you're likely to be seen as inspiring and impactful, but unless you build in time to reflect and recover, you might unintentionally miss the joy in the now. Slowing down doesn't dull your drive, it actually helps your insights and influence land even more powerfully.
Yeah, honestly, I felt like it was spot on. And it is that is a big thing. I constantly am pause to celebrate, pause to celebrate, like slow down, so all of those things. It's not new information, but it's good, reinforcement of what I need to do. So
You should celebrate. You're getting close to 100 episodes. I mean, you're not like you're 80 something in. I think this is 80
yeah,
something. Like you're
yeah,
getting there. 100 episodes of this is pretty incredible that you've gifted all this wisdom and knowledge back out to the world. So
yes. I am. Actually, my friend Camille, shout out to Camille, she was like, we should have a party when you get to 100 episodes. And I was like, okay, I think we should do that.
I think
I
you should.
like
I
that.
absolutely think you should.
Okay, well, I think that's a good note to end on. What is one thing you want to reflect on more from our conversation?
I'm finding this to be very very reflective of the moment that I'm in, and I am feeling like I'm in a moment of transition. I feel like I'm at the end of something and the start of something else. And so how do I carry forward um the parts of this that excite me and remember the tips about my own quality bar and get things out there um is the thing that I'm going to be reflecting on and thinking about as I move into the next kind of step of my career and life.
I think for me, I'm gonna look into those buckets a little bit more. The four kind of
Yeah,
themes where the themes fit in, and just see kind of how I process all of that. And is there something I want to lean into that's in that fourth bucket that I don't have any of my top 10 in? I think that's also like an interesting thing about these tools is like you can be whatever you want to be. And so, yes, like we should lean into our strengths, but we can also use these types of tools to see where's something that I just want to kind of like embody a little bit more and like balance things out for myself. Yeah.
sounds like a plan.
Well, it has been a pleasure to spend the time with you and to talk about
Same.
our strengths and reminisce a little bit about our careers, as always.
Appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Thanks for being on, and maybe we'll see you again on Working Your Way in the future.